Yeah. Good. Chike is here. Yeah. Good. So we're going to. So we're starting the fireside chat about Metaverse, NFT, and Web3. And this fireside chat is going to be handled by Chike, who is the Visa head of crypto for emerging markets, and Ronit, who is leading the financial thought leadership at Citi. But I'll let first, I'll let them to introduce themselves, and then we'll listen to their insight into Metaverse, NFT, and Web3. Over to you, Chike.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Chike Ukaegbu. I currently lead crypto strategy for emerging markets at Visa, Visa Crypto. It's definitely a pleasure to be here today with one of the world's foremost technologists, I would say, especially in the Metaverse space field, right? Ronit, I'll let you sort of give a brief introduction of who you are, and then we can jump right into this.
Sure. I don't think I'm the world's foremost technologist in the Metaverse space, but I have spent the last 6 months thinking about it, which is probably more than most people. So I'm based in Dubai. I used to run our financials and fintech research effort for Citi. And for the last year and a half, I'm running a thought leadership team, which is all about the future of money and the future of finance. And we have a big focus on emerging markets, and that's one of the reasons I'm based in Dubai. We've basically a month ago, we published a big report looking at a couple hundred pages, so everything you want to know about the metaverse. So hopefully any question you have is answered by that, but I'll try to answer some of the questions Chike has for me on stage right now.
Wonderful. So we've got 20 minutes. So I'm going to try to make sure that this is
that's cool. That's like 10 pages a minute.
Cool. So if we were to talk about, I mean, in the last 2 years, I would say, there's been a lot of buzzwords, quote unquote, in crypto, NFT, Web3, and more recently, Metaverse, right? If you were to give a brief description of, you know, what these terms are, sure, for the lay person to understand, how would you describe them?
Sure. So a simple way to think about the metaverse is it's simply the next generation of internet. It's internet, period. It's an immersive internet, i.e. you're inside it. You're not like looking from the outside. It's immersive and it's persistent. So when I leave a Zoom call, the call ends, right? If I'm the host. But if I'm in the metaverse, that space, just like if I walk into my living room and then I walk out and my son walks in, he makes a mess, leaves his Lego on the floor or whatever, his toys, and I walk in, I'll see that, right? It's the same in the metaverse. It's, in a way, think about how physical world exists for us. It's 3D, it's intuitive, it's persistent. It doesn't just shut down when we leave the room. That's a philosophical debate, but it doesn't shut down. And the metaverse is like that. The metaverse is in a way taking us back in the digital world to the physical world. So it should be a more intuitive, a more human-centric world. It's not some kind of, it can be seen as a weird sci-fi avatar-driven world, but I actually think of it as a more human-centric world. And that leads on to all the use cases, because it's taking us back into something that actually still digital. It has all the benefits of digital, like it's borderless, it collapses distance, it allows connectivity across vast distances, but it does it in a more human way. So collaboration, social, enterprise, health, education, potential is huge, huge. So that's how I think of the metaverse. It's a space, it's a virtual space. It's like the next generation of the internet. It can be VR. So yeah, I mean, if you bought the Oculus headset, like some of us did during the holiday season, it can be VR based. It doesn't have to be VR based. It could be AR based. Or it could just be like your smartphone. You could have like a 3D type image in a few years on your smartphone. or it could be a gaming console. So we take a device agnostic definition. If you take a very narrow definition, it's going to be VR. It'll still be relatively niche. It'll be a couple 100 million people probably in the next 5 years. They're accessing the metaverse if it's VR only. If you take VR and AR, you're talking about maybe 1 billion people globally. And just by definition, that billion's going to be in the global north, not the global south, or at least it's going to be the elite in Lagos, in Kigali, in Cairo, in Bangalore, in Delhi, in Jakarta. It's not going to be the mass. If you take a narrow definition, and that we can discuss digital divides and digital haves and have-nots. But if you take a broad definition, which is like through a smartphone, like there are 4.2 billion unique smartphone users in the world now, 4.3 billion or some number like that. And there are way more smartphones than that, but just unique users. That number is going to grow in the next 5-7 years, just given the expansion of cheaper Indian and Chinese smartphones. So if I take a smartphone definition of the metaverse, it could be pretty inclusive. As long as you've got a phone, you'll access the metaverse. So that's the metaverse. I don't think I've got time to do NFTs and other stuff, but let's just focus on the metaverse.
Okay, so let's do that, right? In your report, your recent report, you said you're projecting that there will be about 5 billion users, yeah, right? And will create trillions of dollars in value. Yeah. Now, when I talk to my cousins in Nigeria, for instance, yeah, and we talk about the metaverse, the first thing they say is, I'm going to use Nigerians in here would understand what I mean, and then I'll explain. Okay. Who metaverse help? That's who is the metaverse helping, right? Yeah. Because to them, it's not realistic.
Yeah, yeah.
You talked about use cases. Yeah. What are the practical use cases for the everyday African?
Totally.
Yes, in being able to create value in the metaverse.
Yeah, yeah. So think about some of the most important things in our life. Social, health, education. And we can talk about money and enterprise later, but think about education. You're, okay, I don't know that much about Nigerian history, but let's stick to Indian history that I do. I come from India originally. Then I grew up in the UK, as you can tell from my accent. But so one of the seminal moments of Indian history is the Declaration of Independence. Jawaharlal Nehru's speech, midnight, in August in 1947. Now today, a kid in school is probably learning that. He or she is bored. Some 8-year-old kid or 10-year-old is like, oh, at 7 years old, like the guy's dead. Why don't you learn about it? Imagine you could transport that classroom for 10, 15 minutes back to that Declaration of Independence speech. Imagine how transformative that would be. When I was about 8 or 10, I had to sit through class and listen to, every country has an origin story, right? So this was the Indus Valley civilization, like 4,000 years ago, apparently there was a very advanced civilization, what's today Pakistan or Greater India. And we had to sit through that. Guess what? We forgot everything we learned in that class pretty quickly. Imagine you could be transported back to Mohenjo-Daro and pick your example from whatever Nigerian or African country you want to do. That impact in educational terms will be profound. You will remember, the kids remember, or healthcare. I'm in like some rural part of ABC country. I'm on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I can't fly to Karachi for my operation, or I'm in rural Kansas and I can't get to wherever. Through VR, through AR, I can treat that patient. That's profound. So there's huge use cases in health, education, commerce, social. My mom, like many of our parents, massive Facebook user, right? The only time I use Facebook is to log on to my Oculus headset because I need that's the only time I haven't used Facebook for like 10 years. But my mom is a massive Facebook user. And, she left India 40, 50 years ago. So I don't know, ages ago. But all those college friends that she had 40, 50 years ago, she became friends again because of Facebook. Now, that's an amazing positive story. There's a lot of negative stories of Facebook, right? But you could do anything positive in the internet. If you think about the metaverse as a 3D internet, you can do. So that's what's the use case? And then there's obviously the negatives, like everything bad you can do. Scams, harassment, hate, all of that can happen in the metaverse, but in 3D visual reality. I mean, you want your kids to be harassed on the internet? Imagine the metaverse, what happens? So this is like, it affects every part of our life. It affects every segment of society. And then from an enterprise, or, we both work for financial institutions, well, ultimately money moves. And then we have to work out how money moves in that. And that's where tokens come in. either cryptocurrencies, which you're involved in, or CBDCs, so centralized digital tokens, or the old fiat rails. But that comes later. But the real use case is that this is just the next, Web 1 was, and I'm aging myself, when I was at college, it was a desktop, right? You go to the college lab and fight the physics PhDs off the computers, use the lab. And I used the computer because I actually edited the student newspaper, so I had to go and use the computer. Web 2 was smartphones. Not quite, but it kind of overlaps broadly. Web 3/Metaverse is that, but taken into a 3D visual, intuitive way. And we learn visually, we interact visually. That's why we wanted to get together, I guess. I assume that's where you came. Maybe you came for the coffee, I don't know, but that's where you came, right? Because you wanted to see each other. So that's what the Metaverse will allow us to do.
I have a lot of questions, right? Did so many of them, but I'm going to try to, because of time that we have. Let's narrow this down a little bit more.
Sure.
We're both in financial institutions. For you to create value for people, for economies, there has to be exchange, right, of money. What exactly would money look like? And I know you sort of touched on cryptocurrency and CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, and fiat. What will money look like in a way that is different from how we currently use payments today?
So money will be the same and money will be different. So I've got two hands, right? Two-handed economist. So what will be the same? So getting back to your Oculus, I'm logging on through Facebook or probably holiday season 2023, I'm guessing it. Maybe 2022, but 23. We will spend a lot of money because this big company called Apple will come and just take thousands of dollars out of our pockets without us realizing, right? Because they'll produce an amazing kind of next generation Oculus and we'll all want to buy it. And when we access the metaverse through whatever the Apple Oculus will be called, we'll be inside the iOS system. And we might just use Apple Pay, or we might use Visa in the Apple Pay. And hopefully it's a Citi issued card, maybe it's a Chase issued, but it'll be the existing rails. But what if we have a blockchain-based metaverse? So the meta is going to be a spectrum. At one end, it'll be centralized. At the other end, decentralized. At the decentralized end, which is Web 3, that's where tokens come in because it's blockchain-based. I can't have the existing payment rails on blockchain. Now, this is where obviously Visa can come and go, hey, we can be Web 2.5. We can abstract away the complexities of Web 3 because 95, 98% of us don't want to mess around with the complexities. Maybe not this group, but the broader society. It's some high 90% number that doesn't want to mess around. Generally with money. That's why we like Uber, right? We get in, we know where we're going, we know where the cab is. Actually, now it's getting expensive, but I don't have to mess around with finding, before I used to travel to the US, I needed dollar bills every time I came. I got a stack of dollar bills at home still, right? What fintech did was fintech took away the hassle of dealing with money. That's what fintech does. It just makes it easier. Whether it's lending, payments, it fixes that pain point, which is money is often a pain to deal with. Now, the problem with Web3 is it takes us back into money being a pain to deal with, which is great for the technologists or the crypto enthusiasts. But for most of us, we want someone to come along like Visa, Web 2.5 and make it simple. So it'll be somewhere on a spectrum. On this side of the spectrum, it's DeFi. It's crypto, it's tokens. So way to think about it is tokens at this end and accounts on this end. So the financial system we live in today is account-based. If I want to move money from me, Chike, let's say it's in dollars to make it simple. There's a debit from my Citi account and there's a credit to his whatever bank account is. So it goes through the financial system. But money originally was a token. The gold coins, the silver coins, the whatever. I would hand it Chike, that would be an atomic settlement. The settlement happens. I've handed money. Now we can do that digitally through digital tokens. They can be cryptocurrencies where the value fluctuates, or they can be CBDCs or stable coins. Some stable coins are more stable than others, but that's what money is going to look like. It's going to be heterogeneous. It's going to be like, kaleidoscopic, a zoo.
Is that the most I mean, if the goal of technology and innovation is to make our lives better, right? Do you think that all of the challenges or where we are currently in terms of payments and money transactions and exchange of value is what we will want in the metaverse, right? If that is supposed to be an upgrade to where we are currently, what is the most effective form of transactions or payments Yeah, you sort of talked about, Web 2.5,
Yeah.
right? Let's stay on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you expand on what that really looks like without it being Facebook becoming Meta and now trying to run the Metaverse, right? What is that ideal?
Yeah, Web 2.5 is you get the benefits of decentralization and DeFi and crypto at the back end, and the simplicity and convenience and elegance and beauty of what fintech does at the front end. And that's where Visa comes in, and hopefully Citi will come in as well. You take away, because most SMEs, small businesses, individuals don't want to deal with the complexity of the back end, but the back end complexity has advantages of liquidity, instantaneous settlement, all kinds of positives that DeFi bring. Now, there's no simple answer to what's good and bad. In many countries, including Nigeria, in the Netherlands, in India, unlike the US, there's a faster payment system. You can move money real time. NIBS has been doing it for years. I can't remember how many years. FedNow will do it in 2023, I think. Now, there is, I think, half the US banking system, you have real-time payments, the other half you don't. So that's actually pretty good. I get real-time payments. But if you're in the internet or in the metaverse and you want to do atomic settlement, I just want to basically move money, like I said, the coin I hand over, you could only do that through a digital equivalent of a coin. So that's where crypto comes in, or DeFi comes in. So if you want just speed and you happen to be lucky and you live in a country that has faster payments, you can get speed. But you can't get that kind of direct person-to-person, if you like, direct P2P atomic settlement through faster payments. But in many countries, the issue is not so much in the country. The issue is cross-border. I love the analogy of if I make an investment in a fintech and it happens to be the bank account, the money is going, let's make it specific. I invested in an Egyptian fintech 18 months ago. No, 12 months ago. It was Eid, so it was about 12 months ago. I sent the money from Dubai, from a very big American bank. Guess which one? Anyway, it went, and I was waiting. And the founder's calling me and messaging me again. So money arrives. I've sent it. Week goes, 2 weeks go, and I'm now messaging the founder. Have you got the money? And he's like, no. And I'm like getting worried. He goes, don't worry. This happens. And it's Eid, so you got to have 4 days holiday in Cairo for Eid or whatever. It took 3 weeks for my wire transfer to go from Dubai to Cairo, from one very big American bank to a very big Emirati bank. Cross-border is broken. And it's the same, you're moving money across most. It's different if you're moving money. Like I did this morning, I moved money sitting in my hotel room in DC from my bank account in Dubai to London because my son is first year at college in the UK. It went like that because certain payment rails work and other payment rails don't. And that's where tokens and crypto is a really valuable plan B or option B. Cross-border, intra-Asia, intra-Africa. You don't need it so much intra-Europe because there's pretty good efficient payment systems. Ironically, in the US, so richest, most powerful country in the world, it doesn't work so well sometimes if you don't bank with the right bank.
So part of the reason why I am sort of trying to stay on the money thing is when we look at some of the reasons for adoption of crypto in some of these emerging markets. For instance, you talked about payments, right? People who are trying to transact from, say, Africa to China to buy goods and stuff. Crypto became a viable alternative to the traditional banking systems, right? For remittance, the same thing, right? Instead of paying the exorbitant fees that these institutions charge, crypto was an easier way to do it. However, on the regulator side, they see all the negatives of crypto, right? Yeah. Where you sort of now have stable coins in between the extremes of what crypto could be, how speculative it is, and wherever they think all the negatives they think crypto can result in, versus all the inefficiencies of fiat, right, and our current systems. And my question is, if we are going to move into the metaverse, based on the adoption of crypto as a viable alternative to some of the inefficiencies currently, what will that take? What would that look like? Because I think the innovations, the leapfrogging and all of that will happen in emerging markets because of why and the needs that would arise from that. But what do you think that future looks like? I don't know if that makes sense. As we talk about the metaverse, right?
Yeah, sure. But and if you think about the metaverse as defined as the next generation of the internet, then it's pretty much the same question you'd ask about Web 2. It just applies to the metaverse. Now, you're right that there are greater problems. There are greater breakages in the global south than in the global north. So there's more scope, whether it's fintech, Web 2 or Web 3, there's actually a bigger payoff. If you're a policymaker or an entrepreneur, if you're solving in a way bigger problems, real profound problems. The issue for the global south, though, is when it comes to the metaverse specifically, is it's a double-edged sword. As in, remember the really truly immersive internet metaverse, truly immersive metaverse is probably only going to be 1 billion users in the next decade, not 5 billion. And that's going to be skewed towards wealthier parts of the global south and then much of the global north. So there's going to be a potential real, if you're a policymaker or an entrepreneur, there's going to be a real digital divide. Now, just throw out an anecdote. Think about the fintech or the internet boom you've had in India in the last few years. Think, why did it happen? Is it because there are lots of clever Indians? Not really. I mean, it's just a very big country, so we're going to find some good engineers. The real one major reason it happened is that data costs plummeted about 4 or 5 years ago. So I speak to a lot of my fintech friends in India who say, I only exist because Geo happened, because the Ambanis happened, because they collapsed data costs. And if you look at data costs, relative disposable income, you know what I'm going to tell you. Most African, not all, but most African countries really screen badly. So we're talking about immense amounts of data, because that's what it is. I'm talking about going from 2D to 3D internet. That's just an exponential increase in data. And if already today, I can't really, from an affordability perspective, I'm not wealthy, or if I'm not like spending an exorbitant amount of my income on data, I've got a problem. This is, if I was the, I mentioned names of institutions, but if I was like, say, a major multilateral institution based in DC, or a government in Abuja or wherever, this is the best thing I could do for my population. Almost, well, clean water and healthcare is probably better, but like the next best thing, because the societal benefit you can get from having cheaper data is transformative. Because suddenly you'll be able to, and you all know the examples today, right? You can be based in wherever. You can be based in Nairobi or Lagos or Kigali, and you could be working for a company in London or in Virginia. And think about that kind of flattening and the raising effect it has on welfare around the world. And in the metaverse, it'll be even more. We'll just collapse distance. But it'll only work for the average person in the global south if we have cheaper data. So that's like a huge, huge problem. So this is going to be a double-edged sword. This going to be if it's not addressed, we're going to have the same digital divide that we talked about when the internet first began to roll out. And I had a personal example back in the UK where a very senior educational, like something called Ofsted, which is the Educational Inspectorate, and she was telling a friend of mine, not me directly, she was telling a friend of mine who I know very well, going, this metaverse thing, it's just a gimmick. And I was thinking, oh no, because all the kids who go to state schools, there are these bureaucrats who are saying, this is just a gimmick. Meanwhile, all the kids who go to private fee-paying schools will already be using headsets. And so it's really important that our policymakers think about this as really profoundly positive for society as a whole, for young people, for people with ambition, just in general. So yeah.
Okay, so I have one more question before hopefully we can get 1 or 2 questions from founders, right? Because we represent 2, financial institutions that may have the same blind spot when we talk about the metaverse. So it'd be great to hear from people who actually build it. In terms of building the ecosystem of developers that can solve problems, right, innovatively, that will help or foster adoption. One, what are the challenges you see in terms of, the infrastructure that will be needed to accelerate adoption of, crypto or the metaverse or Web3 or whatever? Yeah. And then, okay, let's go with that first. And then I don't know.
It's simple. It's bandwidth and latency. For the metaverse to work, I need more bandwidth and I need lower latency. So I need to build the rails. Just like, when you go around the US and you visit the US, and I live in Dubai, when I came here as a kid, I used to marvel at, wow, the infrastructure is so great. The 1960s, 1950s, you all built the highways. The federal government built the highways. Now I'm coming, oh shit, things are falling apart here. You got to build the rails. That's what you got to do. And I don't think individuals can do it. Maybe a far-sighted billionaire could do it. Just like the Ambanis did for Geo. You would own digital economy if you did that.
So what opportunity lies for these founders who are building for the future on a continent that lacks infrastructure? Because we don't accept no.
Yeah, so there's an infrastructure problem that, as I said, like in some countries have been fixed by either good leadership or entrepreneurs seeing the opportunity, just like Geo and the Ambanis did. There's also a huge amount of, and this is where the free market comes in, there's a huge amount of capital out there chasing this opportunity, both centralized capital in the fiat world and decentralized capital. And that money is going to flow. So I don't think there's a shortage of money. So if you're a founder and you say, look, I've got a good project or a good idea, there's a lot of money that's going to be available for metaverse projects, for blockchain projects. And people look at the trade-off. I mean, if you could, as I said, think about it as just Internet 2.0 is just bigger, better, more immersive. So all those benefits are going to be there for founders. The biggest problem is your TAM, right? As a founder, your TAM, if you're in most African countries, unless you're in Nigeria, South Africa, and even then, your TAM is small. Your TAM becomes global in many services, many, whether it's education. Education's a really good one. My colleague Miguel's just walked in. Like me, Miguel lives in Dubai. We have an Arabic teacher that comes to teach my 8-year-old. She could be back in Alexandria, back in Cairo, in the metaverse. She could do equally a good job teaching my 8-year-old, because my 8-year-old's digital native, right? When I was doing research for my report in the metaverse, the first time I got into some virtual lands, I was like, I couldn't even get into the room, like physically walk into the room. I got my 8-year-old to help me out. He was like, Dad, that's how you do it. It's like, okay. Because for them, it's like second nature. It's just like for us to walk into a physical room, it's the same. So education, and I'm just thinking like all this, whether it's teachers, doctors, it's not just software engineers, but a lot of smart, clever people will benefit from this. But you need to build the rails, and it's going to be unevenly distributed, and that's the big challenge.
Okay, I'm going to save my last question and ask for one or two questions from the audience, so that we're not just here having this. Yeah, him. Please tell us who you are, so that we turn it on.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Chinedu Onekwe. I'm the founder of African Digital Art. I'm going to challenge two things and ask a question, right? So I wonder if in your estimation you included the landing of the Equiano sea cable and then Starlink and kind of the exponential effect of growth. Like, for example, I thought 2017 that the venture capital market in Africa was 300 million, and there would not be this 5 or 6 billion that we're seeing today. So things compound on themselves, and so would data and the investment. I wonder if you included that in your assessment, and also I didn't hear, and I wonder how you kind of assessed in your report, since it's hundreds of pages, the opportunity for Africans building for the content stream necessary for the metaverse to exist with those billion people and the opportunity that provides. Have you included that? So those 2 points, can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, so the short answer is explicitly no, but generically everything you've just said, I've kind of maybe badly tried to explain, because what you're talking about is, because what the internet did was it took my TAM from being my town or my country to being borderless. This is simply putting that on steroids, right? So absolutely. And actually, I was saying about how private capital is there to fund this. Now, it's a kind of chicken and egg debate about whether or not the amount of VC that capital went into Nigeria last year and Africa in general last year was a function of, infrastructure that had been put in, or simply risk appetite went a bit crazy. So yeah, yes, there are real opportunities, but there was an element of, whether it was in Nigeria 2 years ago or in Pakistan last year, a lot of previously underinvested countries just got a lot of risk capital because we were at the tail end of one particular cycle. So there was that going on as well. But big picture, absolutely, that point of TAM, the TAM suddenly goes from, I've got a viable TAM, which is not just a billion people or whatever, 1.3 in the continent, it's anyone who's interested in African content. Could be sitting here in DC, they could be sitting all over the world because it's not just in, Afrobeats is listened to in Dubai, not just in the US. So it could be like, you're talking about a TAM that's actually well beyond the continent. I'm just conscious of the time, and I don't know how much more time we have.
I think, okay, so we have time for maybe one or two others.
Yeah.
And TAM is total addressable market.
And I'll be around later on if you just want to grab me one-on-one and chat. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mike Reed. I'm a project manager currently based in Virginia. And one of the questions I have is about some of the different ways that the benefits of the metaverse are presented to different groups. One of the things that is constantly promoted from the business development side is that the metaverse is a way for companies to co-develop projects more easily. So for example, if I have a TV show and he has a children's cereal, it gives us ways to collaborate together. We can build a brand and both promote, our businesses effectively. So you referenced the 4.5 billion users that will have Metaverse Lite or Web 2.0 through their smartphones. I wanted to hear your perspective on how this can open up opportunities for business development and specifically increasing collaboration among providers.
Yeah. So there's a collaboration element, which is simply the fact that you can collaborate online today, but it's not as intuitive as if you and I are sitting here doing this conversation. And that was my opening comments about I don't think about the metaverse as this sci-fi digital experience. I think of the metaverse taking digital back to us being more human, and that allows greater collaboration. And there's specifically the blockchain metaverse, where you can, through code, have direct person-to-person collaboration. And I don't need to have institutions to do that. So there's that second aspect as well. So one is like a visual rendition aspect, just what it looks like. And the second is like the legal side of it, like ownership side of it. It's just, if we're blockchain literate, or we have someone who's blockchain literate in our team, then we can collaborate just person to person. You can be in Virginia, I can be in Dubai. We can collaborate. We're just taking, if you've all, many of you have built businesses or you've invested in businesses, one of the things that what hits you is just the amount of legal paperwork everything takes. Actually, when I speak to my friends who became founders and say, you left a big company, you become a founder, what hit you the most? You say, the amount of time I spend with lawyers and or regulators if you're in fintech, but particularly lawyers. And that's because everything we do has to be codified through these somewhat old-fashioned rules, paperwork, and blockchain potentially makes that simpler so that it could make collaboration easier.
Awesome. All right. So one last question before the time cop kicks us out. So when we, and this is sort of closing thoughts, in terms of crypto adoption, which we talked about, and NFT use cases and Web3 and all of these great stuff. I know a bunch of brilliant founders building on those, building for those, right? I think one thing that, just to his point, in terms of the metaverse and adoption and use cases and all of that, the West, in my opinion, will adopt and use differently than many emerging markets. What do you think would drive it in emerging markets?
Can I ask a question back to you?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you explain that last point as in the West versus emerging markets?
So when we look at
I'm not
crypto,
being deliberately dumb, but I didn't get it.
no. When we look at crypto adoption, right, in the West, even with NFTs in the West, it's all about gaming and collectibles and art, right? In emerging markets, play to earn was one way that facilitated adoption in the Philippines, right? Government, of course, in El Salvador helped to, Bitcoin adoption, trade and remittances, and storing of value or preserving value, or avoiding devaluation of currency, helped to drive adoption on the African continent.
I think I get the question. Yeah.
So for the metaverse, I feel like the adoption of the use cases in the West will be different from emerging markets. What do you think? Okay, the question is, do you think it will be? And if not, why? If yes.
I think whether it's the metaverse or NFTs, which is a subset of the metaverse, the blockchain metaverse, there are underlying similarities. One is community, sense of belonging, as in I own the stupid ape, whatever, it means something, right? Or I have the school tie on, or the whatever, the football club's shirt on, and that's universal. That sense of belonging, of wanting to be in a community, a club, or whatever, is just done in different ways. But what NFTs allow us to do, whether it's as a collectible or as a token, that for me is universal. Secondly, speculation, that's universal as well. I mean, I don't need to tell the room like what the stats are for online gambling in different parts of Africa, right? So this stuff is, we all want to have fun, we all want to make money, we all want to go hang out with our friends. Sure, there are cultural differences. I think that there's a specific thing around play to earn, which kind of happened during the pandemic and happened in the Philippines and to some extent in Vietnam. And that was a really specific thing. I don't know how much we can like generalize from Axie Infinity and play to earn. I'm just not sure. So for me, it's like not so much that in emerging markets of the global south, there's going to be play to earn. That was just like something that I think happened. I think that's already not dying, but it's declining, the whole play to earn. Most people just want to play. Most people want to play to belong. Sure, play to earn becomes more important or relevant if you're in a low-income country, but I think there's way more that's similar than different. Places like El Salvador are really edge cases. So maybe controversial, but you can come up to me later and tell me I'm wrong. But I think maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic and utopian. I think there's more we have in common than we have in difference.
Okay, I think we have a lot to talk about at dinner tonight.
We do. Right? He's coming to dinner, Miguel.
Because I think this is where we may start to diverge on ideas.
Sure.
So
I think we need a couple of hours to do that.
Exactly. So. Unfortunately, we're out of time. You see, the cop has come to kick us out. But
if you want to follow up with either of us, you can. First of all, you can download my reports. So go into Google or your search engine of choice, Metaverse and Money, and put in Citi as well on my name, and it'll download. Otherwise, you get some sort of McKinsey report. We don't want that. Just put in Metaverse and Money in my name, and great for McKinsey. And then follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, or just reach out.
Wonderful.
Or just grab me outside.
Sure.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful conclusion. I want to echo what Ronit said. It's a great report. Just download or get that report and look into it. It's an eye opener. But we're going to discuss the same topic of Metaverse and the Web3, but from investing point of view. I don't know if you heard, we all have seen the Cameroonian funeral directors over the last 2 years. They have a unique style of movement. They just made their own first NFT, and apparently they sold it for $1 million. So now we're going to switch from the Metaverse, from the theoretical point of view to investing point of view. Why are investors pouring a lot of money into Metaverse, and in particular in Africa? For that, we have our next panel entitled Investing in Web3 and the Metaverse Ecosystem. And for that, I invite Muse to moderate that panel. Muse is the founder and CEO of Revolt Cyber LLC here in the US. He has some patents in blockchain. He's going to moderate the panel with two subject matter experts and investors in Web3, with Gabi Kazoo, we are principal at Harlem Capital, and Jason Essen, from founder and CEO of UTU.